See, it's a brick bodied kid. That's is it the Hey guys, it's Jaden Namjadi from the Drops Mic YouTube channel, coming to you with an album review of the brand new Open Mic Eagle project, Brick Body Kid's Still a Daydream. This is his 6th full-length album. And as far as introductions go, let me just say this. When he says on the track Brick Body Complex that he doesn't fit in descriptions, that's not just some rap filler braggadocio. I mean, this guy combines elements of art pop, underground hip hop, some glitch hop occasionally a bit of slacker rock even. Other genres too, not even just those. It's crazy actually. He said in the past that his two favorite artists are MF Doom and They Might Be Giants. And listening to his music, somehow he gets both influences to show at the same time. I want to talk first about the second single that was released, Brick Body Complex, because I feel like this single introduces the subject matter of the album a little bit better as far as concept goes. Throughout the track, he's kind of switching between his younger self back his childhood growing up in the Chicago projects. And then he switches to the perspective of the building where he grew up, the Robert Taylor homes. And it's this interesting perspective because, you get this picture of Mike growing up and having this hazy upbringing, talking about his mama smoking something in the basement. And then you cut to the perspective of the building, talking about how it's stood there for 10 million snows, wind chill is all in his bones, on Cottage Grove where he grew up. And what's interesting is what inspired a lot of this album is actually those Robert Taylor homes being torn down to make room for commercial buildings. Aside from the housing angle, we get another big concept on the album, which is shown pretty well in the actual first track of the album, Legendary Iron Hood, which introduces us to this sort of alter ego of Mike's, the Iron Hood, paints himself as kind of a superhero, bringing up all kinds of X-Men and Marvel references. I think the line about the magical jewels around his neck protecting him is really interesting, because while it could just be on the surface level some jewels where the Iron Hood gets his powers from, it also calls to mind the importance of a chain in traditional hip-hop, and it was just kind of an interesting blend, I thought. You get a very smooth beat over this. There's a very laid-back piano and bass line with just a little edge to it, just enough to keep you intrigued. Also, a fantastic guitar line from Dan Miller from They Might Be Giants themselves. This is generally the type of instrumental you're going to hear on this album. It's very laid-back, but has some disorienting undertones. And the second track on this album showcases this. How Could Anybody Feel at Home? Very disorienting synths in the beginning, and then this kind of clicking beat comes in and he starts rapping over it. And I gotta say, the hook on this song is incredibly catchy. It's the type of thing that you want to sing before you even really know the lyrics. These lyrics do have some very lonesome subtleties, which is not necessarily new ground for Mike, but when you hear him rapping and singing about it so sincerely, it's impossible not to find it heartfelt and beautiful, really. And speaking of heart, it's on this album. Everywhere, actually. Even when he's just completely making a joke. Like, No Selling, that's another favorite. It seems to comment on society telling black men in particular that they shouldn't have any emotions, how they can't cry. We see Mike kind of comically rapping in this overblown voice about how he, apparently from the perspective of his uncle, how he cried once but hasn't for every summer since. And really just each verse just steps it up even more. On top of this, we are treated to this very strange, kind of wonky, equally goofy beat, and it just matches Mike's flow really well. Happy Wasteland Day continues this semi-goofy commentary trend. While every verse's lyrics are clearly sincere, the hook comes off as a kind of tongue-in-cheek, corny almost to a fault. This is contrasted right away with the repeated phrase, "It's normal now," which is commenting on how it seems like every week now another group's rights are oppressed or another black kid gets shot unarmed, etc. It's an upbeat, goofy protest song, and I like it a lot. There are all kinds of details that I could bring up to talk about why I love this album, from Samus's fantastic verse on Hymnal to the very fantastic horns on Daydreaming in the Ghetto. I could talk about the line on TLDR where he says, "My supervillain name would be Ultra Hater. I'd act really cool then insult you later. That is just an ultra hater thing to do." Wedding Ghost is probably my personal least favorite track for no other real reason than that I just can't really connect it to the overall theme of the album super well. It kind of comes off as more of an interlude track than anything else. I'm also not really a fan of the effects on the vocals. If you are watching this and you think I might have missed some important detail of this song, hit me up in the comments. Toward the end of the album, we hear the track that originally got me excited for this project, 95 Radios, which has a great verse from Haslow. And it definitely has its sorrows, but it overcomes them with the chorus. It basically says, okay, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. Now let's drive around the hood trying to find a radio so we can play this tape. And if you think that sounds corny, it's because it is a little bit, but the sincerity in Mike's voice just makes it so heart-wrenching, really. It's beautiful. It cheers me up. My Auntie's Building is the final track on the album and returns us to the building's perspective. It really makes the last two tracks on this album a juxtaposition of upbeat cheeriness and just utter horror. Over this very industrial beat, we hear Mike's the most frantic we've heard him on this entire album. It's hard to describe. It seems like he's almost crying inside of the studio here. Meanwhile, we hear the building orate, and that's the sound of them tearing my body to the ground as the glitching synths fade out. And it's just like, oh my gosh. And it really puts, you can tell how much these Robert Taylor homes really meant to Mike by just how much attention is put into this album. It seems like every instrumental is just like meant to provoke a certain emotion for you, whether it's kind of wonky and goofy or it's very just soul crushing, like on this last track. In conclusion, I'd say this album is a big success. It's only about 40 minutes, and while I wish it was a bit longer, Mike says a lot in a short period of time. So it doesn't put much in the way of filler tracks either. It's just a solid album. He sticks to what he thinks is important to say, and if he ever strays from that path, he makes sure it's hilarious and worth your time. This has been the word of Jaden Manjotti, Brick Body Kids, Still Daydream, Open Mike Eagle, Drops Mike.